Hello and welcome to another A Tippling Philosopher video. Today I'm going to talk to you about biblical contradictions, and in this case a story about demons, because that's always fun. Now the Bible is full of contradictions. Some of these are bigger than others. Some contradictions I think represent a problem in and of themselves as the contradiction. Other contradictions represent a problem if they're particularly minor in a broader sense, in a sense that it just represents the fact that there are multiple sources and they aren't always accurate. And when you start understanding that certain smaller problems are there, certain smaller contradictions exist, it then casts questions upon the validity and the veracity of the larger claims made within the Gospels. So the issues I'm going to talk about today involve Mark chapter 5, Matthew chapter 8 and Luke chapter 8. And there are really two problems that arise. The first problem is the Gospels contradict each other on where this event took place, either the country of Gadara or the country of Gerasa. And the second problem is that there are either one or two demon-possessed people. And I just want to really have a look at how Christians, in this case, deal with the contradictions, because I think it's not so much the problems in and of themselves, but the ways in which they are dealt with by Christians. Mark 5, verses 1 to 2 says, "They came to the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gerasenes. When he had got out of the boat," this being Jesus, "immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him." A man, Gerasenes. Matthew chapter 8, verse 28. "When he came to the other side, into the country of the Gadarenes, two men who were demon-possessed met him as they were coming out of the tombs. They were so extremely violent that no one can pass by that day." So Mark 5, we had one man coming out of the tombs in the Gerasenes, and Matthew 8, we have two men coming out of the tombs in the country of the Gadarenes. Luke 8, 26 to 27 says, "Then they sailed to the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. And when he came out of the land, he was met by a man from the city who was possessed with demons." So we have these contradictions here. Whether you like it or not, Jesus was met by either one man or two. And I couldn't give a withered fig as to whether this is remotely important or not, but it is a contradiction. So now let's talk about the numbers. And I find this really interesting, this method that Christian apologists use, and I've seen it with the resurrection with regard to the number of women or who they were who visit the tomb of Jesus, and how many angels were there. It's exactly the same technique that they use, and it's really problematic. So J.P. Holding, the apologist, has written in the Encyclopedia of Bible Difficulties, page 325, quote, "If there were two of them, there was at least one, wasn't there? Mark and Luke center attention on the more prominent and outspoken of the two, the one whose demonic occupants called themselves Legion." It's just such a bad apologetic, this. It's ridiculous, because no two numbers claims can ever be in contradiction with each other, because one number is always smaller than the other and is thus claimed to be a subset of the other. So if I play football against a team of 10 men, bearing in mind there are 11 players on a football team, soccer team in the UK, or anywhere where you play soccer. So if I played football against a team of 10 men the other day, when there should have been 11, you would claim that's okay, you obviously meant 11 men, since 11 men includes 10 men. Just because you said 10 doesn't mean there weren't 11. No, it really does. If you said in a court of law, how many people robbed the bank that day? How many people did you see? Well, there were 6 men there. that number, you claiming that there were 6 men at the bank, can't mean any number from 6 to infinity. That's ridiculous. If you went round life talking in those terms, you just wouldn't get anywhere. What a ridiculous apologetic. You know, I mean, it's a patent misuse of language, and I can't believe that people would ever claim this kind of tripe without feeling that they were simply lying to themselves. JP Holding does continue, so why would they leave one man out? 3 responses come to the fore. 1, the first is a theory that Matthew here and elsewhere doubles to fit the criteria of 2 witnesses. However, Matthew does not double characters consistently enough to make this a worthwhile explanation. Keener, page 282. It also doesn't make a lot of sense because Matthew already has at least a dozen witnesses present in the form of Jesus and his disciples. Back to me. So, as Holding himself claims, this is not consistent enough to be a worthwhile defence. And the idea that Matthew would double witnesses is problematic anyway, because he's not being truthful with his claim. So I don't know. Anyway, it seems a really bizarre approach. But he does continue. Point 2. A second idea is that Matthew, copying Mark, has followed a normal literary procedure for the day, in that he has left out other accounts by Mark, chapter 1, 23 to 26, of the demoniac, also the blind man of 8, 22 to 26, and so has chronologically displaced them quite intentionally. Of course, we do not agree that Matthew copied Mark, at least not in his original Aramaic edition, but the same process could conceivably have taken place using common oral tradition or an Aramaic original. Back to me, as you can tell by my face. This is another incoherent attempt at harmonising. I mean, these people are just not being honest with themselves. There are not 2 distinct events involving single demoniacs. This is one event involving 2 demoniacs. This thesis, by Holding's own language, is only as good as could conceivably, itself a hugely unlikely probability. I would say it is less likely than that. The language is clear and concise. One has to really gerrymander, really mentally contort in order to maintain inerrancy here. Holding proposes a third option. 3. The third idea is simply practical. The second guy didn't do much, or as much. While the one guy came forth yelling and saying legion and all that, the other probably hung back in the bushes. Again, remember that probably, he's just guessing here. Probably hung back in the bushes yelling and physically cowering. Of course, no evidence for that. We don't know exactly what happened, but the bottom line is that if he didn't do anything special and Mark and Luke are emphasising action, they aren't going to divert from the main story and tell all about the guy hiding in the bushes that had to be called out or chased down, and change their whole story to accommodate him. We can see an actual example of this within Luke's Gospel. Wright, as in N.T. Wright, in the Resurrection of the Son of God, page 613, notes within Luke the example of how Peter is reported only to have gone to the tomb. Yet on the Emmaus road, the disciples say that some of our number went to the tomb. Clearly, quote, Luke is quite capable of highlighting one person when he knows, and tell us later that more than one was involved. If Luke can say that there was one person, and then later that there was more than one, the numerical differences between the different accounts of the woman and the angels cannot be regarded as serious historical problems. End quote from Wright. Back to Holding, obviously this would apply to the demoniac story as well. I see this as really inventive. So one account says 2 demoniacs, another says only 1. So the account that mentions only 1 was really talking about 2, since one of the demoniacs only hung around in the background not doing much. So he only mentions the 1. I mean, there's loads of invalid inference, I would say, here. You know, it's saying there can't be an error, so how might we explain this? So it's, well, this could happen, even though there's no evidence that that is indeed what the authors were doing. It's just not accurate history at all. It's not diverting from the main story to mention 2 rather than 1. That's since in Matthew, when he does mention 2, there is no diverting taking place. This is a terrible apologetic. So one is perfectly capable of mentioning 2 without there being a distraction. So this falls down just looking at Matthew. Another example of ad hoc improbability. Highlighting Luke in the Road to Emmaus does not get Luke off the hook, but merely sends him deeper into examples of inaccuracy. And even if the Road to Emmaus example stands, the language is different and vaguer. Matthew says 2, Luke and Mark say 1, rather explicitly. I love the obviously that he throws in as a rhetorical device. It's not obvious at all, J.B. Holding. Another example from a discussion I was having elsewhere includes this defence. Quote, each of the gospel contains details that are not in the others, but none of those details contradicts the details in the others. If I tell you that Jack and Jill went to the mall and bought a DVD, but I tell another person that Jill went to Walmart and bought a DVD, did I contradict myself? No. I just didn't give the same detail. A contradiction would be if the mall did not have a Walmart. You don't have such a thing in this case. We know that Jesus went to an area containing 2 cities, Gerasa and Gadara, and while he was there, he cast demons out of 2 men that met him as he came ashore, and they knew who Jesus is. Again, we have a misuse of language in this false analogy. Names are not synonymous with numbers. If I say in a news report 1 person was shot yesterday at a bank robbery, that does not leave the possibility that I could mean 2 people were shot yesterday in a bank robbery. That's simply a bastardization of the English language and does not stand up to any kind of scrutiny. I would simply be wrong in the first claim. It should just be put to bed as a blatant inaccuracy. Now let's talk about the geography going on here. I've seen Catholic Dave Armstrong, with whom I often argue. He says, quote, personally, I think the most plausible explanation is the seemingly contradictory accounts are simply using alternate names for the same area. As we all know, this is very common today. Jonathan is from England, or is he from Great Britain or the United Kingdom? All are valid names for the same country. I'm from America, also known as the United States. Ancient Persia is now Iran. Ancient Babylonia is Iraq. France is also Gaul. I myself am a Midwesterner, a Michigander, indeed, from the land of the Great Lakes, and Detroiter, also known as Motown and the Motor City and the automobile capital of the world. I'm an Anglo-Saxon, Scottish American and Canadian American, Northern European ethnically. We regularly visit friends near Pittsburgh and can say we visited the Pittsburgh area. We could also say we visited Pennsylvania or Pennsylvania Dutch country. Jesus was from Nazareth, hence is called Jesus of Nazareth or Nazarene. Oh, there's a problem there. Matthew 2:23, Mark 14:67, actual town of origin. As Jesus is Galilean, larger region, the Sea of Galilee itself is also called Lake of Gennesaret and Sea of Tiberias. So he's really stretching things here and being not a little disingenuous. He is false analogizing at best with most of these. The Gospels present 2 different names based on 2 different towns. They're not 2 different names for the same thing. At best, they will have different properties, size, people, geographical features, but with some overlap. Great Britain and the UK, in popular parlance here, are simply 2 names given to exactly the same place. France and Gaul are different because they are separated by history. 2 names for almost the same geography, but not used at the same time. If you use France back then or Gaul now, you get odd looks. The same goes for other examples. You simply cannot apply these examples to the Gadara-Gerasa problem. And this is the main argument to which he adds, this is his main argument to which he adds, all of this sure seems perfectly consistent with calling the same area the country of either the Gerasenes or the Gadarenes, after the 2 major cities. Why is this even an issue, I wonder? Well, it is because atheists, in their zealous rush to make fun of Christians, Christianity and the Bible, start to lose their logical rigour and rationality, leading them to contend for implausible things, as presently. He has the absolute gall, see what I did there, to say this of me whilst using the fallacy of false equivalence. It's worse because he then uses other defence simultaneously that are exclusive to the one he has already used, but I won't go into the Dave Armstrong issues I had. However, I will say here that he states that they are alternate names for the same area, and then goes on to quote that they may be harmonised on the historical grounds that geographical boundaries overlapped, and on the exegetical consideration that country embraced a wide area around the cities. So now we have not the same area, but overlapping areas, and nothing more than a may. He might want to look at the Bayesian probability ascribed to terms like may, the modal probability even, you know, if it may be the case, could be the case, we're already lowering probabilities to below 50%. And thing is, I don't think you would ever call the edge of the Sea of Galilee the country of the Gerasenes either. It's just geographically bizarre. Just look at the map and be honest with yourself. Gerasa is 50 kilometres away. You just wouldn't call that the country of the Gerasenes when you get off the boat. You just wouldn't. Even Wikipedia recognise the issue here. The author, quote, the author of the Matthew Gospel appears to have moved the setting to Gadara to make it more plausible. However, it is still 10 kilometres away. So Origen, who is the early church father, speculated that there had been a town called Gerasa on the shores of the sea. Again, Origen recognises the problem here. And it's important to note that this statement isn't just plucked out of thin air, but from a commentary on Mark. So that is from M. Eugene Boring's Mark, a Commentary, that Wikipedia citation. The problem was well known enough for Origen to think he had to propose a solution. From what I can gather, Gadara, the closer settlement, was far larger at the time of Jesus' activities. And it was seen as a centre of Greek culture in the region, considered one of its most Hellenized centres, enjoying special political and religious status. And later it became a semi-autonomous city placed under control of Herod. It appears to be more important, contemporarily speaking, than Gerasa. So why would the Gospel writers call the area of the Gerasenes when people would not have been called Gerasene who lived there, a smaller town some 50 whole kilometres away from a larger city? So this is my point, that if Dave Armstrong's going to call landing on a shore the country of the Gerasenes as well as the country of the Gadarenes, then you've got a problem, because one of those is a small town that's 50 kilometres away, and the other is a larger city that's only 10 kilometres away. Just bizarre. So I think that given that early church fathers recognise there is a problem here, we have a contradiction in both number of people and the place that this took place, the location it took place. This is, I would admit, a small contradiction on both counts, but it leads you to, one, question the rest of the testimonies, and also allows you to realise what Christians do to try and harmonise these contradictions and the extents to which they go. Just, it's a little insight into their brains, and I think that that they are just simply being dishonest with themselves. Anyway, thanks for dropping by. Remember to question everything, including yourselves, and particularly your attempts to harmonise stuff. And please press like and subscribe and all that stuff. Anyway, take care.